Welcome to the GTM Loop. I'm Angi Milano.
And I'm Holly Glowaty. And today, as always, we are talking about go-to-market strategies, real stories, and real tactics to help you sell it, keep it, or grow it. So on today's episode, we're very excited. We have Chrystal Price from the In Good Company. And I love this topic because Chrystal focuses on a problem that doesn't have a name. So she looks at where basically communication and process breaks down in companies, especially as they are scaling. So oftentimes it is that process is not documented. There's not a great way of communicating. They don't know how to make decisions clearly. And this is a very common issue that sometimes gets thrown at HR. Sometimes it gets dealt with in one team, but not everywhere. It's a combination of process and culture.
Yes.
And it is such an important piece, I think, to get right. And it's something that until we had a conversation with her, I'd not heard anyone really kind of just marry the two. So we hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did. It was so interesting and one that I think we are just going to be thinking about for a while.
All right. Welcome, Chrystal. How are you doing? So
Good.
Today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
All right.
Excited.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to talk to you today because like a month ago, we had coffee with you.
It's a month already. Wow.
I feel like it was a month ago. We were chatting about, all these changes that go on. People make all these structural changes, sales changes, they do training, and they never think about the correlation between management, internal, and what all of the different process points are that we're creating. So that's what we're talking about today. So if someone hasn't met you yet, if someone doesn't know you, tell us a little bit about Chrystal to kick us off and what you would want our listeners to know about you.
Sure. Hi, my name is Chrystal Price, and I am the founder and principal consultant of the In Good Company. And I'm also the chapter director of Tech Walk. In Good Company is really focused on operations and really kind of the link between people and behavior and structure within organizations. There's not a really great terminology for this, so I'm developing some. And our focus is specifically relational operations. And we really seek to figure out how systems work with inside companies and how to make them better so that they can grow and scale better.
I love that. Mm-hmm. When we started having that discussion, the three of us, we were like, we don't know what to call that, but we know it's always an issue. So
it is.
Let's chat about it.
Yeah.
So as we were prepping, I feel like you sent us one response to the questions that I put over that I was like, this is the anchor. So basically, one of the things you said was, what are the sentences that someone is telling you? What are the things you're hearing that signal a future execution issue? And I want to like get right to it. Let's just talk about that.
Yeah, sure. So, these are the things that are kind of, where people sweep stuff under the rug. Having, the culture where it's like, well, everyone already knows this and it's not documented anywhere. Or we'll take this offline and we taking it offline on Monday this week. We're going to take it offline on Tuesday next week. We're going to do it again on Wednesday the following week. And you're just having the same conversations over and over and nothing really sticks. Not getting into the nitty gritty of working out all the process details. When you hear people say, we'll deal with this later, we'll figure it out later. And also just, we talked about this already. These are all kind of sentences that really intimate the fact that people have what they deem as strategy in their heads, but it's not documented on paper. That, there's a lot of tribal knowledge that's happening within the culture. And when you think about it, like early organizations, there's a real focus on hiring people or bringing people on board who have the same thought processes as you are, who have the same, standards as you are, who have the same culture as you do. And so you have a situation where one person can finish the other person's sentences. And that's great for being able to, rapidly get things underway, but it's horrible when it's time to scale and hire people from outside of that, or to make sure that what you're building initially can permeate well beyond that first 1 or 2 years of building.
Yeah. You are I feel like I'm getting hives because it's just ringing. So yeah. I can think of several examples where this came into play, or where you set things up temporarily initially and then never revisit them, like you said, that information lives in this spreadsheet. And even though it's the most inefficient way for it to work, and there's 4 volunteers saying, I will change it, everyone's like, they don't do it. Or, but you're right. Like, there are those unspoken things that I think, especially when you come into a company maybe later and you're coming in as, say, like leadership, and you're not in on that unspoken language, it makes it so hard to ever really be effective. And I think it often gets summed up as, well, it's a communication issue, and it is, but where does that live?
Right. So, I mean, it is, I would say that it's probably about 60% a communication issue, but it's also a change management issue. It's also a way that, strategy is approached the issue. I think that, a handful of people will set the rules, but what they forget to do is to set the decision-making rules. So if there's a person who gets knocked out of the picture, then everything falls apart. No one knows how to actually make a decision. And again, you're operating on all of this different knowledge that has been cobbled together, but there is no specific process to be able to make sure that the decision actually gets made, is carried out, and it sticks.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point. And also, I feel like a lot of times in the companies I've worked at, there's 2 things that jump out at me. One is, everything lives in Notion.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, Notion's been running for 3 years before you got there. And you're like, what is all this stuff? I don't even know where to find what I'm looking for. So that's one thing. It's like a documentation thing. I'm thinking through, what is the idea of taking documentation in something like Notion that's just ever evolving to real life? And then the other thing is, the way Holly and I operate, when you said like the people who could finish each other's sentences, we're very similar. And we're people that don't need a lot of detail. So if you tell me point A, point C, and point F, I fill in all the gaps in between. And you're like that too. Yeah. But not everybody's like that. So then how do you take the Notion problem plus the founder, the initial founder communication, likely why you're attracted to working together, and you bring in someone different? They're like, A, I can't find anything, and B, these 2 never let me have a word. Maybe a little bit of help for us.
Well, I mean, that's the magic, right? So you said that you can take A, C, and F. What is the process that's happening between those 3 points? And that's what needs to be documented. It's not so much that the inputs necessarily need to be documented. I mean, they do. But in terms of the decision-making logic, and then also, giving people the agency to be able to make those decisions, which is something we can get into in a little bit more detail in a moment. I think that is really, kind of the missing piece. People think that someone else is going to intuit the same way as you're going to. And when they don't have, they're not coming from the problem at the same angle, that's when we start to run into a couple of issues there. The other thing is this, especially as teams start to grow and you get more layers within an organization, people are going to do the work that they need to do in order to meet their own ends, which may not be in concert with what the larger goal is. Oftentimes, the harder one person is rowing in one direction, the harder another person is going to row in the other direction in order to balance the boat. And so having clarity around what the entire goal is, which requires input from every person on the team, which requires time, which requires structure, which requires all these things that, founders in general seem to be short on. But we need to figure out a better way to make that equally as part of an organization, as much of a strong vertical as your sales function, as your marketing function, as your, software engineering function, what have you.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good point, because I think you see this problem, like you were saying, like if we can go A to C to F and that isn't documented somewhere, you're seeing this problem pop up as people are trying to adopt any sort of automation with AI even. Like when things aren't documented, you now can't also create shortcuts because people don't know what they're shortcutting, right?
Right, absolutely.
So I think there's there's the efficiency that breaks down when you do want to just simply work with other humans, but then when you do want to automate something, that's the other problem. You're going to run into this where you're not going to be able to do those things that I think sometimes, especially technical founders, think, well, it's fine, I'll just build something. You're not going to be able to even do that sometimes because you don't have it well documented.
Yeah, well, and I think that what you brought up earlier was like the weekly meeting that addresses the same thing.
Yeah.
Frustrating for everyone. But I think the reason why that happens is because not everybody's aligned. So it's like the same thing when you have something that bothers you, and if you don't inherently take care of it, it like raises its little head later on where I have to deal with this again.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Like when you go into a team and you kind of see some of these patterns emerging and you're seeing that same meeting over and over, we're not solving anything. What are some of the things that you would tell people? Here's a few things you should anchor on to start fixing this problem for good. Is it a foundational thing? Like, tell us a little bit about that.
First things first, you have to diffuse the anger. I mean, we've all been in a situation where, you've gone into endless meeting after endless meeting discussing the same thing, and then nothing gets done. I think that everyone needs to level set on the frustration that causes. And let's get that out of the way first and foremost, because we don't want this to be leading to poor morale, which it often does. And then from that point, we really need to, again, focus on the process map, which is at the core of a lot of these things. Why do we keep arriving at the same decision or indecision at the, every time that we're having this conversation? There's a path that leads to this. And I think that people are more focused, again, on the inputs and outputs of that rather than the path. And so if you can sit down with each team, or when I sit down with each team to go through this process map of understanding exactly what that path is, often there's some aha moments there that come up and allow people to see that, okay, here's some repeated patterns that we're doing. And if we, move this point or make sure that we have information from this team first before we go into, making this decision or lack of making decision, then we're able to, rectify some of these issues. And, it's really not difficult work, but it's invisible work. And so considering that this is, the thing that sort of happens between people, between the meetings, so on and so forth, there's some norms that have been created within organizations that reinforce these things. And our point is to pull this apart, to figure out what those norms are. And if there's any ways that we can, modify those to make the process run a little bit cleaner, to also figure out, are there some inputs that we might be missing? Or is there an outcome that we might be missing as well? I think, most people assume that this just happens automatically, and it really needs to be, a documented process.
I agree. I do think people just assume, well, you know what you're doing. You'll just jump in and you'll get it. Or, you know what? I've heard that so many times. You just jump in, you'll catch on. I think the first time we had this conversation, it was just, we felt like, oh my gosh. Like we had that aha moment where we were like, I've never put a name to this. I have seen people try to like maybe solve it in silos, like within certain teams, or say it's an HR issue, or but it's not. It really is. You're right. It's like this combination of things. And it is so, I think, just truly important, especially when, like teams are remote. And I think that's fine, honestly. Like have a remote team. But you're right. When there aren't norms and there aren't these standards for how things are done, it's really hard to accelerate or just like hit the ground running, which, you know, especially if you're a startup, that's what you want.
Right. And I think one of the things you said that struck a chord with me is the inaction.
Yeah.
Oftentimes way worse than action, because I think when you keep sweeping something under the rug, or you keep saying, oh, we'll do it later, we'll document it later. In my mind, when I think about my own behavior, the only time I ever do that is when I don't have the answer and I don't know what to do. So I say, unfinished, do it later. But when you pile all those on top of each other, it becomes also a stressor, which causes inaction. So what's some of the things there when you're working with a team, or even like as we're working together, if you can sense it's going to cause inaction, like nip it in the bud kind of thing. So what are some maybe like ways to think through that?
So I think that, you know, we're all afraid of, you know, what we've been throwing in the closet. And when you open the closet door, it's all going to come tumbling out. And you have to chip away at it. You know, the root issue of a lot of this is just a general lack of shared understanding. And, you know, some of this does kind of come back to some culture issues, but it's not all completely culture. Right. That occurs within an organization. But I think that, again, setting up systems, first of all, so that you don't have to pile things in the closet, are obviously, you know, that's obviously the right answer. By the time I get to people, that probably hasn't happened. But really, it's just kind of, you know, chipping away at things one by one. Again, going back to this process map, I'm just thinking of a couple of organizations that I'm working with right now that have been in existence for some time. And, you know, when I ask pointed questions about who owns something, then that, you know, tends to become a point of contention. And, you know, kind of clearing that out of the way, making sure that there's no plausible deniability for something that didn't get done. That's a source of inaction. Making sure that, you know, we're definitely putting a person's name on a task to ensure that it gets done. And if there's indecision around that, let's figure out how we can work that out. Is this something that can be taken care of with another system? Can it be taken care of by another person or be outsourced? Can it be taken care of by automation? Oftentimes, you know, there's a solution to that that's not as scary as you might have thought it was in the first place. Unfortunately, one of the biggest challenges is that, especially working in the technology space, is that people want to throw automation at everything. That's how you get the gigantic, you know, Notion repository. And it's like, well, we'll just throw it into Notion and everything will be fine. But, you know, organizations run on people. Yes. We're seeing this change a little bit where, you know, maybe we'll be managing some agents, but guess what? You're going to still be a person managing some agents. And those agents aren't going to work unless you have decision rules. So again, at the end of the day, it really is, you know, focusing on ownership, focusing on containers for the work, and also focusing on decision rules in terms of who owns what and who's going to carry what out.
Yeah. And then the other part you brought up earlier around change management, because sometimes it's like, oh, we set up our process, it's all perfect. But then a new person comes in who has a different personality type, or things change, like you evolve into a different ICP or whatever it is that you're dealing with. Like, how do you think about that? Change management, is it a yearly thing? Is it a monthly thing? How do you keep the notion, the process going so that it doesn't get stale?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. And I kind of feel like, you know, this is the scale. Obviously, it's dependent upon each organization. Reviewing, you know, process change once a year is not enough. But, you know, things shouldn't be changing so rapidly that they don't have a chance to permeate either. So the first option there is to really understand, like, what's the sweet spot? There'll obviously be some things that are changing a bit more rapidly, and you need to account for that, and some things that ought to be a little bit more stable. I think that, again, setting up the expectations that, yes, things are going to change and allowing flexibility in your systems to account for that is the key to begin with. But making sure that, you're actually taking your post-mortem meetings after something, you've had a big project or something like that, seeing what went wrong, what didn't go wrong, figuring out how to continuously incorporate that feedback. When someone new is onboarding, ensuring that they're not just nodding and smiling, but incorporating their feedback and giving them the agency to do so. If they come in, they should be able to state how have they've done something differently or how they see something differently. And that's not a signal that you need to change it straight away. But once you adapt your organization to this culture that things can change in a controlled manner, I think that sets you up for future success. Now, obviously, there are going to be bombshells that come through where you don't have control over the change. But building a resilient system and ensuring that, the people in your organization are resilient in the first place goes a really long way to be able to manage those types of bombshell out of the blue changes that you may not have anticipated before.
One of the things I always think of is for people who are not process people. So I like details, but I don't like details when I have to detail them out.
I do appreciate that.
I appreciate process, but it's hard for me to sit down and be like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. So when I think about say we brought Chrystal in to help us set things up, to me, it's this big, overwhelming problem. How long would you say you come to these organizations? How long does it go from we have a problem, we have this stuff we have to work out, to getting traction and moving forward in the right direction and having a process that's resilient, like you just mentioned, as you grow, that accelerates the problem. But how hard is it to fix this like big, audacious problem?
It's iterative. So, there's often changes that can be made within the course of 1 week. You do have to get used to being able to think in a different way. Oftentimes, we pick up our things. We're like, we're just going to go for it. We're going to get this done. And this type of process work is a little bit more measured. I'm thinking about, some clients I'm working with right now who are like, I need you to change this process right now. They're coming up on a really busy time in their schedule where their attention is very scattered. This is not the time to implement large scale process change. So the very first thing that we're going to do is document and observe to not only see the processes in and of themselves, but the behavior of the people. If I notice that, one person, regardless of how many conversations that we've had, is still, sticking to an old process, then it's time for me to step in and ask, like, what's the barrier to this? How, what's one small thing that we can do to move you along in order to make this process stick and to, ensure that your goals are meeting the goals of the organization and vice versa, that we have shared understanding here. So, I like to have quick wins. I like to, see some type of improvement be made over the first week or so of an engagement with a person. But, realistically, saying how long a process takes is also dependent upon the people who are working in the organization and how large an organization is and, how many layers you have and how much this permeates. Start small, find one area to work on, use it as a pilot and see how that rolls out. Work with people and let them know that they're safe in the process. The intention is not to utilize this as a punitive measure. The focus is really ensuring that people feel seen and heard at work, and that we're valuing their time and their resources. Oftentimes, the people who are doing this, a lot of the interstitial work or the glue work, relied upon very heavily, and they're being taxed. And we want to make sure that people have healthy organizations. You don't want to try to rapidly grow with a sick organization, because it's like any other illness or disease. It just grows rapidly and out of your control. So let's make sure that we're utilizing our people resources as well as we possibly can, and treating them with respect.
Here's a question for you, because I've seen this happen where like a founder will bring someone like yourself in. They know there's an issue, but the founder, the head of this company, is the one who's like, I get to live outside of process. How do you deal with that? Because that I see a lot. A lot. I've never heard that.
That's tough. And I think that, it takes a certain amount of self-awareness, of recognizing when you are, in fact, the problem. And
so say there's that lack.
Now I've got Taylor Swift in my head. So I'm the problem, it's me. And I think that the most successful way to frame that is to get the founder to think that you're asking for a friend. If you frame issues in the sense that, there's a person in the organization who's the bottleneck. And sometimes, just depending on personality, it takes a little bit longer to kind of get people to realize this, but there does, eventually that light bulb moment does happen where they're like, I'm the bottleneck. And furthermore, the other way to frame this is, to ask them, are people constantly having to come back to you to have a decision made, or have more input, or they're taking up way more time of yours than you want them to take up? And then that usually is the kicker. They're like, okay, I'm the problem. What can we do to alleviate that? And the motive is selfish, right? They don't want to be bothered. They want to, preserve more of their time. And I mean, they obviously should be working at the top of their profession. The founder, at a certain point, when you have a growing team, the founder should not be the one deep in the spreadsheets. You've hired someone else to be able to do that.
Well, this has been a great conversation with you, my friend. Always. I feel like we could talk about this topic for another, hour and a half. We could keep chatting and chatting and chatting. But I think if you're thinking about building culture from the beginning, scaling culture, all of the different elements that impact this, if you had to give like some advice to a founder, where to start? So we've talked a lot about scaling, but where do they start? And I think before we let you go, that would be the best like ending is if you want to stay intentional, how do you start?
Bake process in. I think, many founders think that it just flourishes naturally. And it's a muscle that you got to flex just like anything else. At the beginning of our conversation, I know I spoke to the fact that within organizations, we have business units, right? We have a sales unit, we have customer success, we have all of these other units. You even have a people and culture unit, but you don't necessarily have a people relationship unit. And people and culture and HR is not the same thing. We think about this in the context of how we interact with customers or clients, but we don't think about this process in terms of how we interact with one another within the organization. And, protecting that concept and really elevating that concept when you're beginning pays dividends in the long run. Having a process to jointly be able to develop decision rules, that's huge. That's one of the biggest things that really causes bottlenecks within organizations. And it can alleviate a lot of founder headaches down the line. At that point, you don't necessarily get stuck with like, oh my gosh, I got to get all of this, strategy and process development out of my head and onto paper. If you have, the decision-making rules in the first place, everyone else can help you build that process out. and you're not the one who's necessarily stuck doing all of the work. So reinforcing that collaborative process and getting the inputs from, the bottom to the top, really go a long way in developing that type of collaborative culture where people feel safe to speak up, where people feel as if their ways of working has significant input. And it also reinforces that although each of these units or each person within the organization has a different goal, that they're all working towards a collaborative goal, so that you're not working very hard in developing something that's contrary to the organization's goals.
Yeah, that's really good feedback. That's actionable, I feel like, which is, I think, the best way to drive this in action.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not here to make, policy for policy's sake.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's what people worry about. Yeah. They're like, oh, it's going to be like a rule I have to follow, or it's going to constrain us in some way. And I just think people want information. Like having run events, I always say people want to know where they're going. They want to know where to go. Free time is like, oh, what do I do? Like, so everyone likes a roadmap. And I think for some reason, there's this like idea that is going to somehow stifle creativity or someone's way of doing things. It's like, no, it just gives them guardrails. Right. It tells them where to go and how far they can go.
And I think that, it really does quite the opposite, because instead of trying to clean up a mess further down the line, you've already contained it. So you have more of an opportunity to be creative and to figure out, the fun stuff without having to do all of the, trying to stuff everything back into the closet, when it would have worked out so much better if you would have, put it on shelves in the first place.
Or in the first place, it's not resonate at all with us, as we just put all of our stuff in the closet next to us here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, Chrystal, thank you so much. This was a wonderful conversation. I think we're going to be thinking about it well into the day.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. And if people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach out?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's pretty reliable. We have Tech Walks the it's the second Sunday of each month at 10 a.m. in Union Park, and the last Tuesday of the month at 5:30 p.m. Right now we're at Navy Pier. As the days get longer, we'll be switching to the Chicago Riverwalk. I'm in a lot of places. I usually publish a digest every Monday on where you can find me. So
awesome. Well, Chrystal Price, thank you so much for your time today.
It was great to chat with you, and I think we all learned a lot today.
Yeah, great. Thank you.